As of today, I've frozen all your accounts. You're nothing now but a poor, pathetic wretch with nothing to your name, my husband said from across the table. Trash like that deserves to be treated that way, my mother-in-law added. They both laughed, demanding I get on my knees and beg. I simply remained silent, but in 30 minutes, a single phone call would turn their laughter into hysterical screams. The air in the dining room was heavy, the tension so thick you could have cut it with a knife. On the surface, however, everything looked perfect. The long, luxurious mahogany table gleamed under the light of an expensive crystal chandelier. A meal worthy of a 5-star restaurant was laid out on plates of the finest porcelain. The aroma of roasted filet mignon mingled with the subtle fragrance of the lilies that adorned the centerpiece, but for Claire, all this luxury felt like a cold prison. She sat meekly, dressed in a simple, sober-colored dress, a stark contrast to the two people seated across from her. On the other side of the table, her husband, Blake Marshall, sat like a king on his throne. He wore an expensive silk shirt, deliberately unbuttoned at the top, and sported an ostentatious wristwatch that could buy a house. Beside him, his mother, Marilyn Marshall, was covered in jewelry from head to toe. Her arms were laden with gold bracelets, and a massive diamond necklace glittered, competing with the crystal chandelier hanging above them. Both of them seemed immensely pleased with themselves that night. They exchanged conspiratorial smiles, smiles that made Claire's stomach churn. She knew exactly what they meant. Tonight was her judgment. Claire looked down, picking at her nearly untouched plate. She pushed the salad around with no intention of eating. She had lost her appetite 3 days ago when she saw Blake and Marilyn whispering earnestly in the study, then laughing out loud as she walked by. They thought she was a fool. They thought she knew nothing. During their 5 years of marriage, Claire had played her part to perfection, the submissive, modest, slightly small-town wife. A woman from a humble family who got lucky enough to marry Blake, a promising young entrepreneur. That was the story Blake and Marilyn had told everyone. A bitter smile touched Claire's lips at the reality. Her modesty was a choice, not a necessity. Her style of dress was a principle, not a sign of being backward. And that humble family they always looked down on was, in fact, the owner of the Sinclair Group, one of the largest corporate conglomerates in the country. She had deliberately buried that truth deep inside, searching for something genuine. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not for what she had. She remembered her late father's last words. "Wealth is an excellent servant, but the worst of masters. Daughter, don't let it rule you or the one you love. Test a man's heart with your simplicity." Claire had tested Blake, and tonight was the presentation of the results. Blake had failed spectacularly. "Don't you like the food, Claire?" Marilyn's voice, laden with its usual sarcasm, broke the silence. "Or have you lost your appetite for expensive meals? Perhaps you should get used to stale bread." Blake chuckled. "Leave her be, Mom. She's just sad. It's natural. It's her last night eating at this table." Claire raised her head. She didn't cry, she showed no fear. She simply looked at them both with calm eyes. That calmness, more than anything else, infuriated Blake. He wanted her to beg, to cry, to at least break down. "Why don't you say anything?" Blake finally shouted, slamming his silverware down. The sharp clatter on the porcelain made the atmosphere even more tense. "Blake, a little class," Marilyn chided, though her eyes betrayed her enjoyment of the situation. "To hell with class." Blake glared at Claire with pure hatred. "I'm sick of it, Claire. Sick of your innocent face, sick of your fake modesty, sick of being married to a woman who isn't on my level." Claire remained silent. She was simply waiting. Blake smirked cynically. "Fine. Since you don't seem to understand subtlety, I'll get straight to the point." He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. In a low but lethal voice, he said, "As of today, Claire, I will no longer be transferring any money for your expenses." Silence. "All of your accounts were frozen this morning," Blake continued, a triumphant glint in his eyes. "Those bank accounts I opened for you, the ones I filled every month out of my generosity, all empty. Zero. It's over." He leaned forward as if to savor every moment of Claire's downfall. "You're poor now, Claire. Genuinely destitute. You are nothing without me." Marilyn could no longer contain her laughter. She let out a shrill cackle that filled the room. Well done, Blake. So well done. You've finally come to your senses. She looked at Claire with contempt. You hear that, you ungrateful wretch? You're broke. Ha ha ha. Then Marilyn added with venom, a piece of trash like that deserves to be treated this way. You should have thrown her out long ago, Blake. She's a burden to our family. An embarrassment. Look at her. She looks like a beggar. Claire felt her heart pound, not with fear, but with anger. She could tolerate insults against herself, but insults to her principles, to her way of life, were another matter. But she still held back. It wasn't time yet. Drunk on power, Blake felt that insults weren't enough. He wanted more. He wanted her absolute submission. Look at this, he said, pointing to the gleaming marble floor beneath their feet. My shoes are dirty. He looked at Claire. But I still have a little pity left in me, he paused. If you get on your knees and beg me, maybe I'll give you bus fare back to your hick town, Marilyn clapped. What a great idea, Blake. Put her on her knees. Tell her to kiss your feet and ask for forgiveness for living off us all this time. Yes, Blake said, his smile widening. Get on your knees, Claire. Kiss my shoes and admit you're nothing without me, and then I'll toss you a few coins. The room fell silent again. Blake and Marilyn waited. They waited for Claire to break. They expected the tears. They expected the desperate sobs. But Claire sat perfectly still, unmoving. She didn't cry. She didn't even look angry. She was simply staring at a point on the opposite wall, just above Blake's head. There, an antique grandfather clock ticked away silently. Her eyes were fixed on the hands. 8:29 p.m. 1 minute, Claire thought. Blake was growing impatient. Are you deaf, or have you turned into a statue? I told you to get on your knees, he yelled. Calm down, Blake, Marilyn said with false concern. She must be in shock. It's normal when you suddenly become a beggar. Ha ha. Claire took a slow breath and looked at the clock again. The minute hand moved elegantly, 8:30 p.m., on the dot, as if synchronized with destiny. At that precise moment, Blake's phone, which was on the table, rang. It wasn't a vibration or a normal ring. It was the special tone he had assigned only for the most important calls, a sound that resonated like a victory fanfare. Blake jumped. Marilyn stopped laughing. Blake glanced at his phone, first annoyed at the interruption of his moment of triumph, but then his eyes widened. The name on the screen was not just anyone. Senior Director, Federal Reserve Bank, he read aloud in disbelief. Marilyn gasped. The Fed? Why is he calling you son? It must be about one of your big deals. Blake instantly sat up straight, his arrogance flooding back. It must be good news. Maybe the approval of my latest project. He cleared his throat, shot a look at Claire as if to say, See how important I am? And answered, Yes, this is Blake Marshall. He said it with an imposing voice, trying to ignore the strange tremor in his hand. Claire lowered her head to hide the smile that was beginning to form on her lips. The game had begun. Blake listened. The smug expression on his face slowly vanished. His smile froze, and confusion appeared in his eyes. Excuse me, what are you referring to? There was a pause as he listened to the voice on the other end. Execution? His voice went up an octave. The collateral has been executed? Blake listened again, and his face began to change color. From arrogance to confusion, and then to a deathly white. Cold sweat began to beat on his forehead. Total asset freeze? He whispered to himself. This house, the cars, the accounts. No, that can't be. He gripped the edge of the table. How is that possible? How can the primary collateral be revoked? He shouted into the phone. Then, he suddenly whipped his head toward Claire. His gaze was no longer one of contempt, but of pure terror. The phone slipped from Blake's hand. The expensive device fell onto the thick tablecloth with a soft thud, but to Blake and Marilyn's ears, it sounded like the detonation of a bomb. The small voice on the other end could still be heard. Hello? Hello, Mr. Marshall? Before the call finally disconnected. But Blake didn't care. He wasn't looking at the phone anymore. His eyes were fixed on Claire, on his wife, whom he had, until that moment, considered stupid, helpless, and poor. Marilyn, not understanding what was happening, started to become alarmed by her son's reaction. "Blake, what is it? What did they say? Why are you so pale?" she urged, shaking his arm. Blake didn't react. He just kept staring at Claire, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "What did you do?" he whispered hoarsely. It was barely audible. It was not the arrogant voice of the king passing judgment moments before. It was the voice of fear. Claire moved for the first time all night. She silently picked up the napkin from her lap and, with an elegant gesture, dabbed the corners of her immaculate lips. She folded the napkin carefully and placed it beside her untouched plate. And then she raised her head. Her eyes, normally docile and patient, now pierced Blake with a look that was sharp, cold, and calculating. "Me?" Her voice rang out, clear and firm in the sudden stillness of the room. "I haven't done anything, Blake. Don't lie." Blake slammed his fist on the table, making the plates and glasses rattle. "That call, the asset freeze, the collateral being revoked, this is your doing." Marilyn finally understood the thread of the conversation. This entire disaster had happened just after Claire looked at the clock. "Witch!" Marilyn shrieked, jumping up from her chair, her face flushed with fury. "Did you do some kind of black magic? Did you curse my son?" "Calm yourself, Marilyn," Claire interrupted. Her voice was still quiet, but it carried an authority that silenced Marilyn instantly. "There is no magic here, only the truth." Claire rose from her chair. Her posture was erect. Her simple frame held a serene but powerful face. Suddenly, she no longer looked like the modest, downtrodden wife. She looked like someone in control. "You're right," Claire said, looking directly into Blake's terrified eyes. "I did do something. I made a call." She glanced at the clock on the wall again. 46 minutes ago. At 7:44 p.m. to be exact. "Who did you call?" Blake asked, his voice trembling. "My lawyer," Claire replied. Blake and Marilyn laughed, a hysterical, forced laugh. "A lawyer?" Marilyn scoffed. "What lawyer can you afford? You don't have a dime, and you think a lawyer can take on the Federal Reserve?" Blake added, mustering what little courage he had left as he felt his legs weaken. "Not just any lawyer, Blake," Claire said. "Not like the ones you know. He's the managing partner of our family's law firm." Blake frowned. "Your family? You mean those poor farmers from upstate?" Claire smiled, a faint smile filled with irony and pity. "You really believed the fairy tale you invented, didn't you? You never even bothered to find out who I was. You only saw what you wanted to see. A dumb small-town girl you could walk all over." Claire walked slowly to the large window, gazing out at the illuminated garden, a garden whose maintenance she paid for. "That call," she continued, her voice echoing in the room, was a very simple instruction. "A code word we prepared a long time ago. The code word for the final phase." "What final phase?" Blake whispered. "The final phase of this charade. That call activated the order to execute the collateral on all of your assets." "Collateral? What collateral?" Blake still didn't understand. "The company is mine. I built it from scratch. All the assets are in my name." "In your name?" Claire let out a small laugh. "Are you sure? Let's refresh your memory, Blake. 5 years ago, when we met, who were you? You were a mid-level manager who had just been fired for nearly bankrupting your previous company. You were drowning in debt. Your business plan was rejected by every bank and investor." Blake's face turned even paler. It was the dark past he always tried to erase. "And then," Claire continued, "as if by a miracle, a mysterious investor appeared who suddenly believed in your plan. The same banks that rejected you were suddenly calling to offer you unlimited lines of credit at 0% interest. Did you think it was just your lucky star? That was Mr. Cole," Blake stammered, remembering the name of the mysterious investor. "There is no Mr. Cole," Claire said flatly. "He was a fictional person created by my legal team, a shell company set up to finance you." Claire slowly approached Blake, who was now slumped in his chair. She stopped right in front of her husband. "That mysterious investor," she said softly, "was me." Marilyn's jaw dropped, speechless. "No, it can't be. You were poor," she whispered. "I financed your company," Claire cut her off. "I bought the office building. I paid your salary. with which you bought that expensive watch, and the sports cars, and every single piece of jewelry your mother is wearing. Claire glanced at Marilyn, who was subconsciously clutching her diamond necklace, trembling. Yes, Marilyn, those jewels you always bragged about? I paid for them too. And the primary collateral that the Federal Reserve just executed, Claire turned back to Blake. It wasn't collateral from your company, Blake. Your company had nothing. It was an empty shell. The collateral, Claire enunciated each word clearly, was a trust fund in my name, Claire Sinclair, worth hundreds of billions of dollars. The fund that I put up as a guarantee so you could play king for the last 5 years. And today, I decided to take my toy back. Blake collapsed. He was no longer sitting in the chair. He slid to the floor, gasping for air. No, this is a nightmare. Oh, it's not over yet, Claire said. Blake's phone, forgotten on the table, began to light up nonstop. Not calls, but text message notifications, one after another. With a trembling hand, Blake picked up the phone. His eyes widened as he read the flood of messages. Bank of America, your credit card has been declined for insufficient funds. Chase Bank, check withdrawal denied. Account frozen. Wells Fargo, emergency loan application rejected. Private Banking Division, notice of default. Foreclosure proceedings will be initiated. My accounts, my personal accounts. Why? Blake looked at Claire desperately. Ah, that, Claire said lightly. Remember when you said you had frozen all my accounts, the ones for the expenses I transferred to you each month? Claire smiled cynically. You made a mistake, Blake. You didn't freeze my accounts. My main account is in a bank in Switzerland, a bank whose name you don't even know. The account you froze, Claire stepped closer to him, was, in fact, the only real account in your name. The account for your salary as CEO that I gave you. And that account, Claire's voice turned icy, is the same one you used to transfer money to your mistress at her apartment. Blake froze. Marilyn let out a choked gasp of horror. A mistress? Yes, Mom, Claire said without taking her eyes off Blake. Your dear son, so successful and brilliant, was a con man and a traitor. He was planning to leave me high and dry after stealing my entire fortune. What he didn't know was that he was only biting the bait I threw for him. And now, Claire said, that account is frozen not by me, but by the banks, because your profile has been red flagged by the Federal Reserve. You've just been put on the financial blacklist. You are a credit risk everywhere. Blake stared at the now dark screen of his phone, as empty as his future. So, Claire said, her voice final, as if closing a book, not only have you lost your company, not only have you lost this house, not only have you lost your cars, you, Blake, Claire stared down at the man trembling on the floor, are completely and personally bankrupt. You have absolutely nothing. Congratulations, Claire said. You are now genuinely destitute. Exactly what you told me I was just 30 minutes ago. Blake remained on the floor. The man who moments before was so arrogant now looked like a dirty rag. Claire's words, completely and personally bankrupt, echoed in his ears. It was a death sentence. Marilyn reacted differently. After a few seconds of silence, her eyes became bloodshot. It was no longer arrogant fury, it was the rage of a wounded animal. Con artist, she shrieked, breaking the silence. You tricked us, you cunning bitch. You pretended to be poor. You set a trap for my son. Marilyn lunged forward, her ring-laden hands ready to scratch Claire's face. But Claire didn't flinch. She didn't take a single step back. She looked at her mother-in-law with a coldness so intense that Marilyn stopped dead in her tracks. Tricked? Claire repeated. Who did the tricking here, Marilyn? Let's talk about the truth you ignored out of your own arrogance. She took a long breath, not out of nervousness, but to open an old wound she had deliberately kept closed. 5.5 years ago, Claire began, her voice calm but resonant in the room, when I met Blake, I was managing a charitable project for our foundation in this city, undercover, as just another volunteer. After my father's death, I was sick of men who only approached me for the title of heiress to the Sinclair Group. Blake lifted his head slightly. He had heard that name, but never connected it. I met him in a small cafe, Claire continued. He had just been fired. He looked frustrated, desperate, but he also had this overwhelming ambition. He told a complete stranger all his dreams, and Claire smiled bitterly, I was a fool. I thought that ambition was pure. I believed that desperation was genuine. I fell in love with his potential, with the man I thought was inside. We started dating. I never lied about myself. I just didn't tell the whole story. I said I came from a normal family, and you two believed it instantly. Why? Because you wanted to believe it. It made you feel superior. Claire looked at Marilyn. Remember, Mom? The first time Blake brought me to your place? It was your small rental apartment. You looked me up and down. Just this? What vulgar clothes. Do you think you can be on my Blake's level? Those were your words. Marilyn took a step back as if slapped by her own memory. I swallowed that insult, Claire said. When we decided to get married, I asked for a simple wedding. You agreed, right? Not because you were humble, but because you didn't have the money for a lavish feast. You spent the entire ceremony complaining. How embarrassing. He's marrying a nobody, and the celebration is just as poor. Claire's gaze now fell on Blake, who was watching her with a mixture of terror and dawning comprehension. And then your brilliant career began. After we got married, you tried to start a business and failed spectacularly. Your partners scammed you, the debts piled up. You came home drunk, crying like a child. You said you were going to kill yourself. Blake closed his eyes as if not wanting to remember that humiliation. That's when I broke my principles, Claire whispered. I couldn't watch you fall. I wanted to save my husband, to restore his pride. So I created the angel investor from Singapore, Mr. Cole. No, Blake whispered. Yes, Blake. It was me. Through my legal team, I created a shell company called Bright Future LLC. That same company bought 95% of the shares of Marshall Industries, a cheesy name, but I let you choose. Fresh money started flowing in. Your debts were cleared overnight. The banks that had rejected you were suddenly chasing you. Of course they were chasing you, Claire smiled cynically. I had deposited collateral worth billions of dollars in their parent banks. They had no choice but to give you whatever you asked for. Success came too quickly, Claire continued, her voice now devoid of emotion, and it changed you. The ambitious man I knew disappeared. In his place appeared the arrogant monster I have before me tonight. You started insulting me, saying I brought you bad luck, that I wasn't on your level as a successful businessman. And your mother, Claire turned to Marilyn, who was now leaning against the wall to keep from falling. She was the one who enjoyed this false success the most. She demanded this luxurious house. I bought it. She demanded European cars. I bought them. She demanded jewelry, designer bags, trips abroad. I gave them to her through you, Blake, so you would look like the successful, prodigal son. All your friends at the country club praised you. How lucky to have a son like Blake. And you would laugh. You would glance at me while I served the drinks and say, "Ah, yes, but what a shame he's married to this useless woman who lives off us." Living off you? Claire laughed, a dry, humorless laugh. Marilyn, Blake, it was you who were living off me. The truth hung in the air, heavy and lethal. The house they were in, the clothes they wore, the food they had just tasted. It all came from the woman they had called trash. Check it, Claire told Blake. Whose name is on the deed to this house? Not Blake's. It's in the name of Claire Sinclair, my name. Whose name are the registrations for all the luxury cars in the garage? The company's name. And who owns the company? I do. Blake said nothing. He knew it was true. He never bothered with the paperwork. He only knew how to use. He only knew how to show off. He was a puppet CEO whose name was borrowed to run everything. A puppet CEO with a salary paid from his wife's money, the same wife he insulted. You said I was poor. Claire took a step forward, looming over Blake, who was still on the floor. Her face emanated an aura of unbreakable power. You were wrong, Blake. You never had anything, she whispered. You and your mother were nothing but parasites, living off my blind generosity. Claire looked at them both, one on the floor, the other against the wall, both completely shattered. And tonight, she said with a final voice that settled all arguments, my generosity has run out. The silence that followed Claire's declaration was sharper than any scream. It was the silence of death, the end of the era of illusion in which Blake and Marilyn had lived. Blake desperately searched his mind for a single flaw in Claire's story. "There has to be a mistake. This can't be happening. It's a lie," Blake shouted hoarsely. He barely managed to get to his feet, exhausted but driven by desperation. "A lie. I still have access. I'm the CEO. I can reverse this." He stumbled toward his study, a few feet from the dining room. Claire and Marilyn followed Marilyn like a zombie, Claire with the calm stride of a victor. Blake threw open the study door, lunged for the luxurious leather chair Claire had bought him, and opened his top-of-the-line laptop. He typed in his password with trembling hands. Beep. The screen flashed red. Access denied. Incorrect password or account disabled. No. Blake typed it again, checking each letter. Access denied. Why? He muttered in a panic. He tried to log into the company's banking portal. "You are no longer authorized to access this account. What have you done?" Blake spun around to scream at Claire, who was standing silently by the door. "It's useless, Blake," Claire said dryly. "When I called my lawyer, it wasn't just to execute the collateral." Claire explained systematically, as if giving a business report. That call also triggered an extraordinary shareholders meeting. It was held virtually an hour ago while you were enjoying your steak. The 95% shareholder, my company Bright Future LLC, made a decision. Claire continued. The first item on the agenda was the dishonorable dismissal of CEO Blake Marshall on serious charges of embezzlement of company funds and corporate malfeasance. Embezzlement? Blake's eyes widened. "I didn't do that." "Oh, really?" Claire arched an eyebrow. "The money you transferred to your mistress, Amber, did you think that was your personal money? You took it from the company's operating account, Blake. You called it entertainment expenses. I have all the records, every transfer, every date, every piece of proof." Blake froze. He thought he had been clever. It turned out he was just digging his own grave. "So," Claire said, "when the meeting ended half an hour ago, you officially became a nobody. All your access to the company bank accounts, facilities, everything was revoked at that instant. That's why the director from the Federal Reserve Bank called you. It was the final confirmation." Blake sank into the chair. It was all over. He had lost the company, the house, the cars, and now he had a criminal record for embezzlement. But suddenly, a demented spark of hope flashed in his eyes. "My account!" he yelled, his voice cracking. "The account of yours that I froze. No, my account. I still have money there." He remembered his plan with Amber. He had been hoarding money in that account for months, money he skimmed from Claire's allowance. He had frozen it that morning, intending to withdraw it all to a new account after kicking Claire out. It was his getaway fund. "Ha ha ha!" Blake laughed like a madman. "You forgot about that, Claire. I still have money. The money I froze. I can unfreeze it. It's mine." His laughter was cut short by Claire's. It wasn't a cynical or bitter laugh. It was a genuine laugh, as if she found something truly amusing. Claire actually laughed. Blake, she said, shaking her head as if talking to a foolish child. "That's the funniest part of all this. You were so busy planning my ruin," Claire explained, "that you didn't even realize what you were doing. That account you froze this morning," Claire looked at him intently, "it's true that I created it for you and called it an expense account, but you were mistaken. It wasn't my account, it was your allowance account." "Did you really think I was stupid enough," Claire asked, "to put all my personal assets in a domestic bank account that you could access?" "My primary account is in Switzerland, Blake, under my late mother's name, with her maiden name. You could never touch it. This morning," Claire continued, "you proudly called the bank. Using your false authority as a husband, you ordered them to freeze the account in Claire's name. The bank, which already had instructions from me, simply followed your order. But the account you froze," Claire smiled widely, "was the only liquid account you had. Your monthly salary that I transferred, your getaway fund, the money for your mistress, you just froze your own money, all by yourself." The understanding hit Blake like a freight train. He himself had done it. In his arrogance, he had locked up his only remaining source of cash. "Congratulations, Blake," Claire said. "You've self-destructed." It was the final blow. Blake didn't scream, he didn't cry, he just let out a low moan like a dying animal. He slumped over the desk, his head now resting on the useless laptop. Marilyn, who had witnessed everything, finally reacted. "Demon," she whispered. "You're a demon." Ding-dong. The doorbell rang, a clear, crisp sound in the midst of the devastation. Blake and Marilyn froze. Who could it be? The police? Debt collectors? Claire, on the other hand, was not surprised at all. She glanced at her watch. Ah, right on time. The housekeeper, Rosa, on Claire's payroll and fully aware of what was happening, rushed to open it. A few moments later, 3 men entered the dining room and walked purposefully toward the study. 2 were tall and burly, dressed in black security uniforms with earpieces. Their faces were impassive. The 3rd man walked between them. He wore a suit that looked far more expensive than any Blake had ever seen. He carried a slim, black leather briefcase, and his face was cold and professional. It was Claire's lawyer, Ethan Pierce. "Good evening," the lawyer said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. He ignored Blake slumped over the desk and Marilyn trembling in fear. He just looked straight ahead. "Mr. Blake Marshall and Mrs. Marilyn Marshall, I presume?" He confirmed their identities. Marilyn could only nod weakly. The lawyer nodded once. "I am here on behalf of our client, Mrs. Claire Sinclair." He deliberately emphasized the full name, a name that now sounded like a death knell to Blake. In accordance with the relevant legal documents and the execution of the asset collateral, he continued, "This property and all its contents officially revert to the possession of their sole owner, our client." He looked at Blake, then at Marilyn. "Under our client's instructions, you two," he said clearly, "are to vacate this property immediately." Marilyn flinched. "Vacate? Now?" The lawyer glanced at his platinum watch. "You have 1 hour to collect your personal effects only. Clothing, nothing more." "As of now," he said, pressing a button on his watch, "the clock is ticking. 1 hour." The lawyer's words hung in the air, cold and irrefutable. Blake remained slumped in the chair as if his soul had left his body. He was broken, but Marilyn was different. In an instant, the fear in her eyes transformed into hysterical fury. This wasn't just about the house, it was about her status, her country club, her image in front of her friends. "No," she screamed. "You can't do this. This is my son's house. It's my house. I'm not leaving." The lawyer didn't even turn to look at her. He gave a small nod of his chin. One of the stone-faced security guards took a step forward. "Ma'am, I urge you to cooperate," he said in a deep, emotionless voice. Seeing the large man approach, all of Marilyn's arrogance crumbled. Rage was replaced by pure panic. She knew she couldn't resist. Blake was finished. The bank had blocked them. These men in uniform were real. The loss was real. She suddenly realized the one person in the room who could stop all this, the one person who held all the cards. Her eyes darted to Claire, who was watching the scene silently. Marilyn's face, which moments before was filled with scorn, changed drastically. It became a mask of abject pleading. "Claire." Her voice trembled. "Honey." The word honey sounded obscene coming from her lips. Marilyn rushed forward, stumbling. She went past the lawyer, past a motionless Blake, and fell to her knees before Claire. She didn't just kneel, she prostrated herself. Her frail knees hit the marble floor with a hard thud. "Claire, dear, please," Marilyn wept, real tears streaking her expensive makeup. She clung to the hem of Claire's dress with both trembling hands, hands full of diamond rings that Claire's money had bought. "I'm sorry, honey. I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I was out of my mind. What I said before, it was just a joke." "Yes, a joke. You know I love you like a daughter." Claire just looked down at her, her face serene, as if watching a bad play. "This is all Blake's fault." Marilyn now blamed her own son in her desperation. "He poisoned my mind. He told me you were useless. I was just going along with him. Please, honey, forgive me." She bowed her head, about to kiss Claire's feet. The exact same scenario Blake had wanted Claire to perform. A perfect irony. "Please, Claire, don't throw us out. Where will we go? We have nothing. I promise I'll be good to you. I'll serve you. I'll do anything. Anything, honey. But please, don't take this house from us." The room fell silent, broken only by Marilyn's sobs and Blake's harsh, desperate breathing. The lawyer and the guards awaited Claire's instructions. They had seen plenty of drama, but this was one of the more satisfying ones. Claire finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through Marilyn's sobs like a scalpel. "Get up, Marilyn." Marilyn looked up, her eyes filled with hope. "Your bowing has no value to me," Claire continued, her voice icy. The hope in Marilyn's eyes vanished. "A joke?" Claire asked. "You think insulting me in front of your own son, calling me trash, was a joke? I didn't mean it." "No, you did mean it," Claire interrupted. She reached into her dress and pulled out her phone. She had anticipated this moment. She was prepared. Her fingers tapped the screen. A voice filled the room, clear, sharp, and filled with hatred. It was Marilyn's own voice. "A piece of trash like that deserves to be treated that way. You should have thrown her out long ago, Blake. She's a burden to our family. An embarrassment. Look at her. She looks like a beggar." The recording ended. Marilyn froze, her face turning waxen. She didn't know Claire had been recording her. Blake, from his stupor, looked at Claire with horror. This woman had planned everything. Claire put her phone away. "Trash," she repeated Marilyn's words. "Trash doesn't deserve to live in a luxury house, does it, Mom?" Claire no longer looked at Marilyn. She addressed the lawyer and the guards. "An hour is too long. Give them 30 minutes. And then she gave the final order, the last nail in the coffin. "Make sure," Claire said in a clear voice, "that all the designer items in her room, bags, shoes, clothes, and especially," Claire glanced at Marilyn's hands, which were still clutching her dress, "all the jewelry in the safe and the pieces she is wearing, stay." "No!" Marilyn screamed. It was no longer a pleading cry. It was a shriek of pure agony. "They're mine. They're all mine. Blake bought them for me." The lawyer stepped forward calmly. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Marshall. We've traced all the purchases." He opened his briefcase and took out a document. All those luxury items were purchased with the Marshall Industries corporate card under the Executive Benefits Budget Code. "As the company has been seized," the lawyer continued, "and as Mr. Marshall has been found guilty of embezzlement, all items purchased as company benefits are legitimate assets of the company. Said assets will be auctioned to help cover the damages." He looked at Marilyn. "They were never your personal property. They were only on loan to you. This blow was worse than losing the house. The house was a place to live, but those things, the Hermes bags, the Louboutin shoes, the diamonds they were, her life, her social status, her pride." "No," Marilyn whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "My bags, not my diamonds. No, please." One of the guards stepped closer. "Ma'am, please remove the jewelry." Marilyn looked at her hands, the rings, the bracelets. She looked at her neck, the necklace. She remembered the faces of her country club friends, praising her. She remembered how she looked down on those who wore fake jewelry. Now she wouldn't even have that. The guard held out his hand. "Now, ma'am." The man didn't wait any longer. He grabbed Marilyn's wrist, not roughly, but with a firm, irresistible force. Marilyn screamed as the guard forcibly removed her gold bracelets. One by one. The loss of the house, the money, the status, the pride, all in one night. It was too much. Everything is gone," Marilyn whispered. Her eyes rolled back in her head, and her body went limp. She fainted at Claire's feet on the marble floor. Claire looked down at the inert body, expressionless. The lawyer, annoyed by the delay, said, "Get her out." "Fainted or not, her time is almost up," Claire said coldly. Her order was absolute. "Get her out." The guard didn't hesitate. He didn't try to wake Marilyn. He and his colleague bent down and lifted Marilyn's limp body. Whether a real faint or a fake one, they lifted her as if she were a sack of rice, one by the shoulders, the other by the legs, and started to carry her out. The third guard went to Blake. The man was still in his chair, his eyes unfocused, staring at the blank laptop screen. "Mr. Marshall, it's time to go." Blake didn't react. He looked like a wax figure. The guard had no time for theatrics. He roughly grabbed Blake by the arm and hauled him up. His limp legs barely supported him. He wasn't walking, he was being dragged. His expensive silk shirt was now soaked in sweat, wrinkled, and stained. The humiliating journey had begun. They dragged him out of the study, through the luxurious dining room where the remains of the expensive meal still sat on the plates. They passed through the main living room, under the enormous crystal chandelier. Every step was a reminder of what they had lost. Claire, her lawyer, and the housekeeper followed as if escorting prisoners. When they reached the imposing front door, the two guards had already deposited Marilyn on the front porch and returned. Near the door were two suitcases. Not their usual Louis Vuitton or Rimowa. They were two old, faded cloth suitcases, one with a broken wheel. Blake stared at them blankly. "These are your belongings," the lawyer said. "Our team brought them up from the storage room. They are the same suitcases you arrived here with 5 years ago." Claire had planned everything. She didn't just take away their luxuries, she returned them to their original identity, to their ground zero. "Our team has put some of your old clothes inside. Per our client's orders, you can only take what you brought." The massive wooden front door swung open. The cold night air hit them instantly. Marilyn had already regained consciousness. She was sitting on the cold porch floor, weeping silently, her body shaking violently. She wore no jewelry. Her neck, ears, and wrists were bare. She looked old and defeated. The guards gave them no respite. They shoved Blake outside, who stumbled and fell to his knees beside his mother. Thump, thump. The two old suitcases were thrown out, landing with a miserable sound near their feet. "Blake," Marilyn sobbed. Clang. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, a definitive sound. The click of the automatic lock was heard, locking them out like trespassers forever. Blake and Marilyn were now on the porch of their house, or rather, their former house. With nothing but the expensive clothes on their backs and two old suitcases, the beautiful garden lights continued to illuminate their ruin. The high iron gate at the end of the driveway began to close automatically, shutting them out. And just then, as if the universe wanted to add insult to injury, the sky, which until then had only been cloudy, broke open. It began to rain. Not a drizzle, but a cold, torrential downpour that soaked them to the bone. In seconds, Blake's silk shirt and Marilyn's expensive dress were drenched, clinging to their skin. Marilyn shrieked, her smeared makeup mixing with the rain and tears. "It's raining, Blake! It's raining!" "Where are we going to go?" Blake, who had been like a zombie, finally reacted. The cold and desperation shocked him into action. "The phone," his voice cracked. "I have to call someone." With trembling hands, he fumbled in his pockets. Luckily, his phone was still there. Claire hadn't taken it, probably because she knew it was useless now. The phone screen was wet from the rain. Blake wiped it with his soaked sleeve, opened his contact list, hundreds of names. Friends, business partners, officials, parties, golf. "Greg," he muttered. Greg was his business partner. Surely he would help. Blake called. 1 ring, 2, 3. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried again. Todd, his golfing buddy, who always flattered him. 1 ring, 2 rings. The call was rejected. Todd had hung up on him. "Pick up, Todd, pick up, you bastard," he yelled at the phone. He tried again. Director Wallace, one of his important contacts. "The number you have dialed is switched off or out of the coverage area." One by one, the names in his contacts failed. Rejected, diverted, disabled. Blake couldn't understand. How is this possible? He didn't know. Claire's team had been at work since the first call. An internal press release was sent to all business partners. An official notification was sent to all banks. A note was leaked to Maryland's social circles. Blake was fired. Embezzlement, total bankruptcy, asset seizure. In their world, news traveled faster than fire, and the fastest to flee a fire are the so-called friends. Blake was already poison. Anyone who helped him would sink with him. Why? Why is no one answering? Blake screamed at the sky in frustration. The rain lashed his face. He threw the phone against the wall but panicked and picked it up again. It was his only hope. Marilyn just wailed, "Where are we going to go, Blake? I'm cold. I don't want to be here." Blake slumped onto the wet asphalt next to his mother. The rain, the cold, the rejection, the humiliation. No place to go, no money, no one. This was rock bottom. Suddenly, the phone in his hand rang. Blake's heart leaped. Someone was calling him back. Greg. Todd. He didn't care who. He looked at the screen. Unknown number. Holding his breath, he answered. He held the wet phone to his ear. Hello? Hello? Help me. This is Blake. I need... The voice on the other end cut him off. It wasn't Greg's or Todd's. It was a woman's voice. A voice so angry and shrill that even Marilyn stopped crying to listen. Blake, where are you? You son of a bitch. Why hasn't the money you promised arrived? The woman screamed. I've been waiting at the airport for hours. We were supposed to run away tonight. You've been playing me, Blake. It was Amber, his mistress, the woman for whom he had done all this. Marilyn, in the middle of the downpour, widened her eyes and stared at Blake. Amber? Who's Amber, Blake? Blake couldn't answer. He had just realized that he hadn't just lost his fortune, he had lost absolutely everything. Blake, where are you, you bastard? The woman's voice on the other end of the line was so sharp and furious it cut through the dense downpour. Blake stood frozen, the phone glued to his wet ear. Beside him, Marilyn, shivering from the cold, lifted her head. Her pale face was now filled with confusion. Amber, Marilyn whispered. Who is Amber, Blake? Answer me. Blake ignored his mother. His entire world was now focused on the voice on the phone. Amber, his only escape plan, the one person he thought was on his side. Amber, listen, Blake stammered, trying to shield the phone from the rain. There's been a problem. The plan, we have to postpone it. The laugh on the other end was cynical and cruel. Postpone it? Postpone it? I'm already at the airport, Blake. I've already checked out. We were supposed to be going to Paris tonight. You said everything was arranged, that you'd gotten rid of your stupid wife. Yes, I know, but what? Amber screamed. The money, Blake. Where's the money you promised? Why isn't it in my account? You said it would arrive this morning. You lied to me. This was a nightmare within a nightmare. Being exposed by his mistress in front of his own mother. No, I didn't lie, Blake said desperately. There was a technical problem with the account. I froze it, but I can unfreeze it. A technical problem? Amber's voice suddenly turned cold. Icy. Are you still trying to fool me, Blake? Even now? What do you mean? Blake asked, a bad feeling stabbing at his heart. You're broke, Blake, Amber whispered, completely finished. Zero. Blake felt as if his lungs had stopped working. How? How do you know? How do I know? Amber laughed again, a pained laugh. Your wife. Your stupid wife. The one you always called a nobody. Blake's heart seemed to shrink. Claire. Half an hour ago, Amber explained with venom, I received an email. Not just any email. An email from a prestigious law firm. The subject line was, Notification to interested parties in the embezzlement case of Mr. Blake Marshall. Blake staggered. He almost fell. Oh yes, Blake, your wonderful wife sent me everything. She knew about me, about everything. She sent me copies of the bank reports. The proof that your company was hers, the proof that your house was hers, the proof that you were a parasite living off her money. Amber took a deep breath, her voice now trembling with rage. She even sent me proof of the transfers you made to me, proof that the money you said was yours was embezzled from your wife's company. You made me an accomplice, you son of a bitch. Everything was exposed. Claire hadn't just destroyed him, she had made sure he had nowhere to run. She had poisoned the only well he could turn to. She had humiliated him in front of the woman he thought adored him. Amber, that's not true. She's lying. Blake pleaded weakly. She's lying? The email contained the bank's asset seizure order. It contained your termination letter. It contained a copy of the police report she filed against you for embezzlement, Amber screamed. Did you think I was as stupid as you thought your wife was, Blake? Silence. Blake couldn't say anything. The rain felt like punches to his face. You know what? Amber said, her voice now calm and lethal. I was with you for your money. I put up with all your bragging. I put up with how you insulted your wife, because you promised me a life of luxury. I wanted to go to Paris, not the bus station. "You're not just a con man," Amber continued. "You are the biggest loser I have ever met. Did you think I would be with a beggar like you? You have no money. You have nothing." "Amber, wait, don't ever call me again, you fraud." The call disconnected. Blake stared at the now dark screen of his phone. Empty. His last hope was extinguished. Amber knew he was broke. Amber had abandoned him. He had nothing. No wife, no mistress, no money, no house. He was alone in the torrential rain, soaked and shattered. And he wasn't alone. There was his mother. Marilyn had gotten to her feet. Her body was trembling, not just from the cold, but from a monumental fury. She had heard everything, the plan to escape to Paris, the money for Amber. "So," Marilyn whispered hoarsely, "that was your plan." Blake looked at his mother. His eyes were empty. You were going to run away?" Marilyn asked, her voice rising. "You weren't just going to kick Claire out, you were going to abandon me too." Blake didn't answer. It was the blatant truth. His plan with Amber did not include his mother. "Answer me, Blake," Marilyn screamed, her bony hands now pounding on Blake's chest. "After I defended you, after I insulted Claire for you, you were going to abandon your mother for that whore." "Enough, Mom," Blake pushed her. More out of surprise than anger, Marilyn slipped on the wet asphalt and fell, but she scrambled back up instantly like a wounded lioness. "Bad son, ungrateful, sacrificing your own mother. This is all your fault!" Blake finally exploded. All his frustration, all his humiliation, all his hatred now found a target. "You were always saying Claire was useless. You were always saying I deserved better. You encouraged me to show off. You made me this way. You dare blame me?" she shrieked. "You were the greedy one. You were the one who was never satisfied. You were the one who had a mistress. I didn't teach you to be a traitor. You taught me to be arrogant," Blake retorted. And there, outside the gates of the luxurious house that was no longer theirs, under the relentless torrential rain, the two people who hours before had felt like a king and a queen fought. Now they fought like stray dogs over a bone. They screamed, they blamed, they pushed. "It's your fault." "No, it's yours. Because of your greed, because of your stupidity." They were a pathetic spectacle. The two old suitcases lay soaked beside them. They no longer cared about the rain. They didn't care about the cold. They only cared about who to blame for their total ruin. Their alliance had shattered. They had not only lost their fortune, they had lost each other. A police car drove by slowly. Its blue lights swept over the miserable scene. The officer inside glanced over two vagrants fighting in the rain in front of a mansion's gate. Nothing out of the ordinary. The officer didn't stop. He ignored them and accelerated away. To the world, they were now invisible. They were just what Marilyn had called Claire, trash, washed away by the gutter. Weeks passed. Time did not heal their wounds. Time poured salt on them. Blake and Marilyn were no longer on the street. Blake, with the last shred of pride, had managed to contact a distant cousin, Cousin Dale, from back home, lie about a bad investment, and borrow some money. It was enough to rent a place. It was hell. No more mansion with high columns. It was a tiny room in a narrow, muddy alley on the outskirts of the city. 10 feet by 12 feet. A single-room bedroom, living room, and kitchen, all in one. The walls were thin plywood, covered in mold stains and peeling paint. There was a small window near the ceiling, but it hardly let in any light, so the room was always damp and smelly. There was no bathroom. The bathroom was outside, a small, filthy, stinking cubicle they shared with 10 other families. Every morning, Marilyn had to stand in line with laundrywomen and market porters to use the clogged squat toilet. This was their new life. This was the bottom of the abyss. For Marilyn, it was a torment worse than death. The grand dame now lived in a hovel. She didn't know how to do anything. She had never washed a dish in her life. She didn't even know how to light a kerosene stove. She would sit on the thin cotton mat they had bought, fanning herself with a piece of cardboard and complaining. "It's hot, Blake," she complained every hour. "It's too hot. I can't stand it. And this smell is disgusting. When are we getting out of here?" "Shut up, Mom," Blake would yell. "We have no money, and this is all your fault. If you hadn't been so greedy, if you hadn't had a mistress," Marilyn would retort. Their fights became the soundtrack of their lives. They fought every day upon waking, while eating, while trying to sleep to the sound of their neighbors fighting through the plywood walls. Marilyn, once so well groomed, now looked frightful. Her hair, once perfectly styled at expensive salons, was now limp and greasy. She had no money for dye. Her beautifully manicured nails were broken and dirty. Her clothes, what little was left in the old suitcases, were now faded because she didn't know how to wash them. One day she tried hand-washing as Blake instructed, but she used too much soap. Her hands broke out in blisters, and the clothes were ruined. She cried hysterically all day. Blake, meanwhile, was forced to work. But at what? His name was blacklisted by the credit bureaus. With embezzlement charges, no office company would hire him. His impressive resume as a CEO was now a joke. It was all fake. He had no skills. He couldn't operate machinery. He had no technical degree. His only skill was wearing expensive suits and yelling at people. That skill was useless in the manual labor market. After a week with no work and the borrowed money running out, desperation forced his hand. He went to the largest wholesale market, a place where they don't ask who you are, only if you have muscle. Blake, the man who drove a Maserati, was now a porter. The work shattered him. On the first day, his soft hands were blistered and bleeding from lifting sacks of rice and crates of vegetables. His back felt like it was going to break. He, who used to sit in soft leather chairs in air conditioning, was now under the scorching sun, sweating a sour sweat under the cynical gaze of the market foreman. "Hey, princess," a foreman yelled at him. "Lift that properly. Don't be a little lady, stop slacking." Blake could only lower his head and swallow the humiliation. He needed the money. His pay was daily, a handful of crumpled bills. Enough for a few pounds of rice, a few packs of instant noodles, and the daily rent. Every night he would return to that room. His body stank of sweat and the market. He would throw the crumpled bills on the table. Marilyn would pick them up with disgust. "Just this?" she'd complain. "This isn't even enough for talcum powder." "If it's not enough, you work," Blake would shout, collapsing on the mat. "What am I supposed to do? I'm old, you bad son." And the fight would start all over again. They were trapped in a cycle of poverty and hatred. One afternoon, Blake was taking a break after 12 hours of nonstop work. He sat at a shabby coffee stall in a corner of the market. He was too tired to go home and listen to his mother's complaints. He ordered a bitter coffee and a cup of instant noodles. He slurped the broth greedily. He was starving. In the corner of the stall, a 14-inch tube TV with a flickering picture was showing the business news. Blake normally wouldn't care, but suddenly a face he knew all too well appeared on the screen. His heart stopped. The noodles in his mouth lost all their flavor. It was Claire, but it wasn't the Claire he knew. It wasn't the quiet-faced, docile wife who served him tea. The woman on TV was wearing a perfectly tailored jacket and an elegant dark blue silk suit. She was sitting at a large conference table. The nameplate in front of her read, "Claire Sinclair, CEO, the Sinclair Group." She looked radiant, powerful, serene, and authoritative. A journalist asked her, "Miss Sinclair, it's an astonishing achievement. In just a few weeks since you took over, you've restructured the company and stocks have soared by 30%. What's the secret?" Claire smiled faintly, the same smile she had given Blake that night. "There's no secret," Claire said, her voice clear and confident. "We've simply cleaned out the parasites that were eating the company from the inside. We have dismissed the old, incompetent, and corrupt management and replaced them with honest professionals. This company has returned to its roots, integrity and performance, not fake luxury and ostentation." The old, incompetent, and corrupt management was him. Blake stared at the screen, mesmerized. The spoon in his noodle bowl fell from his hand with a clink. He saw his wife, his ex-wife, being praised by business analysts. He saw her true power, her true success. And then he saw himself, reflected in the TV screen when the scene changed. He saw a dirty man. His t-shirt was torn and soaked with sweat. His face was gaunt, with a neglected, patchy beard. His eyes were red with exhaustion. The smell of the market was ingrained in him. He was trash, he was a beggar, he was a parasite. All the insults he and his mother had hurled at Claire now came back to slap him like a cruel reality. "Hey," the stall owner's voice brought him back. "You broke the bowl staring like a fool." Blake looked down. He had unconsciously clenched the noodle bowl so tightly that he had cracked it, and the broth was spilling onto the dirty wooden table. "Pay for it," the owner yelled. Blake didn't answer. He just lowered his head, hiding the tears of rage and humiliation that were finally rolling down his cheeks. That image on the television, of a strong, dignified, and successful Claire, was burned into his brain. It was a new form of torture, far worse than lifting sacks of rice. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Claire's serene smile. Every time his back ached, he remembered her words: parasites, corrupt management. The image haunted him. He and his mother now lived in a silent hatred. The energy to fight had even run out. They just shot hateful glances at each other in that damp room. Marilyn spent her days muttering to herself, cursing her luck, cursing Blake, cursing the world. Blake spent his days working like a slave. His body was broken, his pride crushed. And one day, that desperation reached a breaking point. Blake couldn't take it anymore. He couldn't stand the smell of the market on his skin. He couldn't sleep on the moldy cotton mat. He couldn't stand the vision of the successful Claire in his head. There had to be a way out. There was only one way out. "We have to go see her," Blake said one night. His voice was hoarse, barely audible over the chirping of crickets and the fighting of their neighbors. Marilyn, who was fanning herself with a piece of cardboard, stopped. "Who? That demon?" "Claire," Blake said. "We have to apologize." Marilyn laughed, a dry, pained laugh. "Apologize? After all this, you think she'll forgive us?" "She's enjoying this, Blake. We have no other choice," Blake yelled, getting to his feet. The small room felt even more suffocating. "Look at our lives, Mom, look at them. This isn't living, it's hell. We eat scraps, we sleep surrounded by rats. I'd rather die than live like this." His desperate eyes met his mother's. "We'll beg, we'll kneel, we'll kiss her feet if we have to. I'll do anything, anything, if she'll just show us a little mercy. A decent room, some money for food. I'm not asking to be rich again. I just don't want to live like a beggar." Marilyn had changed. Her arrogance had long since evaporated, replaced by the harsh reality of life. She looked at her calloused, dirty hands. She remembered her diamond jewelry. She remembered her servants. She remembered the taste of a tender steak. Yes, anything is better than this," she whispered. "All right, we'll kneel, we'll beg." The next morning, they scraped together what little money they had left. It was barely enough for a one-way bus ticket to the city center. They didn't shower. Clean water was a luxury. They just washed their faces and put on their best clothes, which were really a smelly old t-shirt and faded pajama pants. They took a crowded bus, squeezed against other passengers. Their own body odor added to the bus's stench. After a sweltering 1-hour journey, they arrived. They stood across the street, staring at the imposing skyscraper. The Sinclair Group. The letters gleamed in the morning Sunday. It was another world, a world they had once trampled on, and that now seemed so alien and terrifying. They crossed the street. The moment their flip-flop-clad feet touched the gleaming marble floor of the lobby, all eyes turned to them. Well-dressed employees stared at them with disdain for their disheveled appearance. 2 large, neat security guards intercepted them before they even reached the revolving doors. "Excuse me, sir, ma'am. Can we help you?" one guard asked firmly but politely. His eyes sized up their misery. We've come to see Miss Sinclair," Blake stammered, swallowing hard. The guard arched an eyebrow. "You mean Chairwoman Claire Sinclair? Do you have an appointment?" "No, but tell her it's Blake. She knows us. We're family," Blake said, his voice trembling. The guard gave a slight smile, a smile of contempt. "Family? The chairwoman has no family that looks like you. I'm sorry, without an appointment, you can't enter. Please leave." The guard turned away, thinking the matter was settled. "No!" Blake shouted desperately. He tried to push past. The guard moved quickly, pushing Blake back. I said, "Leave!" Marilyn suddenly screamed with all her might. Her shrill voice echoed in the vast lobby. "Claire! It's me! Mom! Honey, help us, Claire!" The lobby fell silent. All activity ceased. Everyone stared. Blake, panicking and humiliated, tried to push through again. "Claire, I need to see her." The second guard joined in. They grabbed Blake and Marilyn by the arms. "If you cause a scene, we'll call the police. Get out now. Let me go." I said, "Let me go." Blake struggled. He didn't care anymore. This was his last chance. "Claire, Claire, help us, honey, please." Marilyn shrieked, tears streaming down her dirty face. The commotion reached the security control room, and from there to the earpiece of Claire's personal assistant. Claire was, at that moment, chairing a board meeting on the 50th floor. Her assistant entered silently, showed her the lobby camera footage on a tablet, and whispered in her ear. Claire saw the scene: Blake struggling, Marilyn crying on the lobby floor. Her expression didn't change. She remained serene. The other directors looked at her, puzzled. Claire looked at the tablet screen for a moment, then said quietly to her assistant, "Take them to the small meeting room on the 45th floor. Give them water and tell them to wait." The assistant nodded. Claire turned back to the board. "Apologies for the interruption, gentlemen. Let's continue the discussion on the Vietnam expansion." Blake and Marilyn, about to be thrown out, were suddenly stopped. The guards had received new instructions. "Follow us," they said, their tone now cold and official. They were led through the lobby, under everyone's gaze, to a private elevator. Their hearts pounded. Did it work? Is Claire going to help us? They weren't taken to the opulent CEO's office. They were taken to a small, windowless room on the 45th floor. The walls were gray, with just a table and 3 chairs. The room was cold. An assistant came in, placed 2 bottles of mineral water on the table, and left without a word. The door closed, and a click was heard. They waited. 1 hour. 2. They didn't dare drink the water. They just sat, trembling. Finally, the door opened. Claire walked in. The contrast was painful. Blake and Marilyn were smelly and exhausted. Claire entered smelling of a soft perfume that cost more than their year's rent. She wore an impeccable cream-colored suit and exuded an aura of calm, absolute authority. She was not alone. The lawyer who had evicted them followed her like a shadow. Blake and Marilyn jumped to their feet. Claire didn't sit. She stood near the door, looking at them. The same look from that night, serene, cold, no longer needing to wait. Blake didn't hesitate for a second. He took a step forward and did what he had promised. He threw himself to the floor, knelt, and prostrated himself. His dirty forehead touched the cold marble floor just in front of Claire's simple but elegant designer shoes. Claire, his sobs were muffled by the floor. "I'm sorry. Please, forgive me," he wept. Real tears, tears of desperation, regret, and self-pity. "I was crazy, blind with arrogance. I've been punished, Claire. I can't take it anymore." He lifted his tear and dirt-streaked face. "I'll do anything, anything. Take me back. I'm not asking to be your husband. I'll be your driver, your errand boy, your gardener, anything, just so I can eat, so I can live in a decent place. Please, Claire, I'm begging you." Marilyn, seeing her son on his knees, instantly followed suit. She knelt, trying to grab Claire's feet. "We were wrong, honey. We've been punished. Look at us. We live like animals. I'm begging you, Claire. Have mercy on us," Marilyn sobbed. "Give us a second chance. A small guest house to live in. We won't bother you. We just want to live. Please, I don't want to go back to that hell." The room fell silent again, broken only by the pathetic sobs of Blake and Marilyn. Claire looked at the 2 miserable figures prostrated at her feet. She let the silence stretch on. For a long time, she let them wallow in their own humiliation. Finally, Claire spoke. Her voice was quiet, dry, emotionless. "Once," she said, "at that dinner table, you demanded I kneel for a few coins, Blake." Blake lifted his head, his eyes filled with desperate hope. "Now," Claire continued, "you kneel before me for the same thing." She looked at him, then at Marilyn. She looked at them truly, for the last time. "The difference is, Claire's voice rose slightly, and she turned away from them, to her lawyer. "Is the severance agreement ready?" The lawyer nodded and handed her a folder. Claire tossed it onto the table. It landed with a thud. "That," Claire said, "is our official divorce settlement and a one-time check." Blake and Marilyn stared, dumbfounded. "A check?" Blake crawled over and grabbed the folder. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a cashier's check. The amount was $27,000, a pittance for the once rich, but a treasure for the beggars they were now. "That's your severance," Claire said. "Use it to start a new life. Go back to your hometown, start a small business. I don't care. It's the last money you will ever see from me." "Claire, but we—" Blake was stunned. He had expected more. He had expected forgiveness, not a settlement. "Take the money and go," Claire said, her voice now sharp as steel. "Do not appear before me again. Do not contact me again. Do not come to this building again." Claire pressed a security button on the wall intercom, a button that connected to the 45th floor security. "Claire, wait!" Blake shouted in panic. "This isn't enough. It's far more than you deserve." Claire cut him off. The door opened. The same two guards from the lobby entered. "Escort Mr. Marshall and Mrs. Marshall to the service exit," Claire told them, "and ensure they are permanently banned from entering this building." "Claire, no!" Blake screamed as the guards grabbed him by the arms. "You demon! You're a demon!" Marilyn shrieked, realizing this was the true end. "Take your money and get out." Claire turned her back. She didn't want to see them again. "You'll regret this, Claire." Blake's voice was cut off as the door closed. Claire walked slowly to the elevator. Her lawyer followed. In the silent elevator, the lawyer asked, "Are you sure, chairwoman? $27,000? After everything they did to you?" Claire looked at her reflection in the polished elevator walls. Her face was serene. "That money wasn't for them," she said softly. "It was for me, so I can sleep at night, knowing I gave them one last chance to change. What they do with it is between them and God." The elevator chimed as it reached the 50th floor. Claire stepped out, back to her boardroom, back to her life. 1 year passed. Time had forged Claire into a completely new person. Under her leadership as CEO of the Sinclair Group, the company hadn't just recovered, it had skyrocketed. She conducted a massive restructuring. All of Blake's cronies, the corrupt managers who lived on flattery and fake luxury, were purged without mercy. She replaced them with a team of true professionals based on merit and integrity. Claire became famous in the business world, not for her luxury, but for her resolve. The woman once scorned for her simplicity proved she could run one of the country's largest conglomerates with an iron fist and a silk glove. She became known for bravely promoting competent professional women, many with a modest style like her own, to the highest positions once dominated by arrogant men like Blake. She proved that modesty and ethics were not weaknesses, but strengths. It was a clear day. Claire was on her way to the groundbreaking ceremony for a new company factory, a major expansion project she had won over 3 major competitors. She sat quietly in the back seat of her elegant luxury sedan. Not a flashy sports car, but a vehicle that reflected her status, silent, powerful, and classy. Her driver, Robert, drove smoothly out of the business district and toward the industrial zone north of the city. The car stopped at a red light at a busy, grimy intersection. This intersection was notorious for being right next to the city's largest wholesale market. Even inside the soundproofed car, one could catch a faint whiff of the market. Claire, who was reviewing documents on her tablet, was slightly distracted by a loud commotion outside. She turned her head, squinting to focus on the source of the ruckus. And then she saw them. Her heart didn't leap. There was no surprise, just a cold sense of recognition. There, under the scorching sun, amidst the street dust and flies, she saw a man. The man was skeletal, his skin burned by the sun to a dark shade. He wore only a torn, dirty tank top and ragged shorts. His hair was matted and unkempt. He was pushing a large cart filled with vegetable waste. It was Blake, now working as a market porter and trash collector. And then Claire saw a second figure, an old woman sitting on a pile of old sacks next, a dirty sewer drain. Her clothes were tattered and filthy. Her sparse, greasy white hair stuck out in all directions. Her face was lined with wrinkles caked in grime. She was rummaging through a pile of garbage, collecting plastic bottles and scraps of rotten vegetables. It was Marilyn. They were in the middle of a ferocious fight. Blake's trash cart had apparently bumped into the sacks Marilyn was sorting. "Hey, you idiot, don't you have eyes in your head?" Marilyn yelled, her voice hoarse from dust and fatigue. "You're the one blocking the way, you crazy old hag," Blake retorted. It was clear he didn't realize he was yelling at his own mother. Or perhaps he no longer cared. "This is my spot, my territory. Get out of here right now." Marilyn threw a rotten tomato at Blake. "You ungrateful beggar," Blake growled. He kicked one of Marilyn's sacks, scattering its contents across the street. They screamed, they insulted, they threw garbage at each other. The two people were no longer fighting over a luxury house or diamonds. They were fighting fiercely over a few square feet of territory on a stinking garbage heap. Claire witnessed the scene. She remembered the $27,000 check she had given them enough to go back to their town and start a modest life. But it was clear they hadn't used it wisely. The money had likely vanished in a brief splurge before their arrogance and stupidity dragged them back to the bottom. And this time, the bottom was much deeper. There was no hatred in Claire's heart, no anger, not even pity. What she felt was a profound sense of closure, a sense of perfect cosmic justice. This was karma. They weren't punished by her. They were punished by their own character. They had become exactly what they once called her: trash. The honk of a car behind her brought her back to reality. The light had turned green. Claire turned, looking away from the miserable scene. There was nothing more to see. That chapter was closed. "Drive on, please, Robert," she said to her driver, her voice calm and firm. The luxury sedan moved forward smoothly. Claire pressed a button, and the tinted, soundproof window closed slowly, blocking out all the noise, all the stench, and all of the past. She looked back down at the tablet in her lap, focusing on the expansion plans for her new factory. She was heading toward her brilliant future, her corporate empire, and she did not look back, not once.